I'm about to give another twist to my proverbial merry-go-round. This is going up another notch. And I think rather than preach a sermon as to what happened, I just point out all possibilities are possible. But what I've been doing in this manner is coming to an end shortly. There is an absolute complexity and an absolute simplicity to this. That is impossible to see under any kind of ordinary conditions. Last week I used the term about swallowing one's own head. And you could take that as being very simplistic. You could take that as being an attempted, some kind of pseudo-Zen statement, or you could take it as having much more depth insofar as such a thing would be literally impossible. Some of the people who have been exposed to what I've been doing for a relatively short period of time are still very confused, both here and in other cities that gets this second-handedly. They could claim to be even more confused because of me not being there, but that's life. The way in which I have been at least talking for the last year or more, some of you newer people, after all my warnings, still operate under the assumption at times, and at very serious times, that this is some sort of discussion group, although we don't discuss things. But that perhaps I am engaged on some kind of intellectual quest. And some people still worry as to whether I am sophisticated, well-read enough, whether I know everything that's going on in psychology, whether I am really that well-versed with some of the ideas that have been put forth in the ordinary halls of philosophy over the last several hundred years, whether I know enough about physiology to know what's going on in the body, that some of the things I have described about the circuits of man and the operations of the intellect and etc. do not absolutely jibe with perhaps prevailing opinion, medical opinion. Or perhaps there seems to be a flaw that I have not put in something that surely should be there if I knew the physical makeup of the human body. And some people are still, again, after my warnings, concerned over me presenting things, especially over the last 18 months, in the guise of questions to you. You know, what could be the possible, unrecognized biochemical purpose of the word "but" in the English language? Some of the people still wonder, you know, is that something that just came to me that I found curious? Did I want somebody to come up with an answer? The simplicity is a kind of enriched simplicity. And I'm going back to one of my drawings as the best way I know how to tell you to map it out visually. The nervous system and line level consciousness. As you all remember, once you thought that you were engaged in some sort of quest, your belief was that it was a truly mystical quest. It would be of a great strange nature. It would take you through many perils, take you on long journeys, expose you to very hyperventilating people, subject you to all sorts of rigors and demands that would be unreasonable and outrageous. And then this great mystical father figure would reach into his turban and pull out a secret message and tell you this is it. But in one sense, you already know enough. In one real sense, everything that someone needs to know, and the idea of a mystical quest, is right in front of you. But that kind of statement, too, can be taken as being so simple that it has no meaning. Behind all of the ideas that you have had, whatever seemed to have attracted you to this in your early days, whatever sort of writings from whatever part of the world, whatever would-be mystic that you had read about or heard about, you expected something that would be absolutely unknown. For them to either give you a magic pill, a magic word, or tell you something that nobody knows. And I have spent some time trying to make you see that if anything was too radical, if anything was too outrageous, it cannot be true. It cannot be true in the ordinary world, and it cannot be true in what you thought was the mystical world. But everyone assumes that the itch they had when they were young, and then that which seemed to inflame the itch, their readings, their imagination about finding some kind of great mystical activity going on, handed down throughout all of these eons, that in the center of it is some astounding mystery revealed to only the initiates. And it would be astounding. But I spent some length of time, if you recall, on several tasks and several maps, and some of you heard it at the time. If it was what you thought of originally as being astounding, if it passes the line that to you was truly astounding, and this great mystical figure said, here it is, but let me warn you, it is astounding, and he or she told you, and according to your wiring, it indeed was astounding, it would be meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. It would have to be something that is non-astounding. But then you're caught, it would appear, because if it's non-astounding, then what the hell was the purpose in all this? Why did I drop out of school and take drugs and go to India? Why did I give all my belongings to this group here in America? Why did I live out here digging rutabagas and making the guru rich? And then he tells me something, and he tells me God is love, that that's the secret. Hell, I knew that. I want to know the real secret. It is indeed complex and it is indeed simplistic. But what takes a very exceptional person making a very specific kind of exceptional effort to ever find out is at line level consciousness, where everybody operates without some sort of extraordinary stroke of fortune and effort. This is where everyone operates, from the Einsteins on down to your Uncle Frank. At line level, and of course everything below it, you have got to realize that you cannot figure anything out. You can gain information, you can learn how to do algebra, you can learn how to be an engineer, you can learn how to operate a computer, but you cannot figure anything out. What you're dealing with is the way in which you were genetically wired up. And so whatever information you have, once it gets past that which would appear to be very specific, factual information, as opposed to a more mystical, more spiritual, more religious, more non-specific information, everything that goes into your system is going to be interpreted by your system. And you've been here long enough. If you can understand anything, you've got to see that by now, without me preaching anymore, without me trying to trick you into seeing it. Even those of you that believe that you've been exposed to this for a very short period of time, you had years before you got here. You read many, many books. You read books that were more arcane than mine were. You heard, or at least you heard or you saw people who obviously were stranger than I am. They acted stranger. You had strange thoughts. You had mystical daydreams. You tried to read books on Hinduism or mystical Islam and all sorts of things. You tried to look at yourself. You tried to study yourself. You tried to study other people. You tried to study what is the nature of evil. You have got to see that at line level, no one can figure anything out. your memory was a foregone conclusion. Your ability to figure anything out was a foregone conclusion. You could continue to get degrees. You could continue to go to night school into middle age. But you're not going to figure anything out at line level consciousness. The information goes in and it is interpreted. It is run through the patterns of your wiring system, and there's nothing to be done about it. Now, among other ways I could point it out was what normally takes place over the broad range of the human drama is those who believe that they are destined to pursue some mystical course, they end up in what I used to call a sandy path system, school, religion, because once they get confronted with the fact that no priest, no rabbi, no guru has this astounding answer, or withal, if they find someone that has what is to them an astounding answer, then all they can do is conclude he's a fool, because the astounding answer is going to be something like, we are all shadows of people living on planet Z29 in such and such constellation, and we are shadows from an unseen sun, and we're their shadows playing out another life. And when we die, we are sucked immediately into these people, into a higher state of consciousness, because that's where God actually lives. That's really not astounding enough, because there's people that believe that. Well, let's assume that none of you people would. That once you read a few things the man wrote or listened to him a while, and he said, all right, here's the secret. You know, have you given me everything? Have you cleaned out your bank account? Have you told all your friends and relatives to get fucked? You know, you can't go anywhere. You're stuck here with me. And you have been digging those rutabagas. And he says, all right, here's the secret, and he tells you that. Let's assume that any of you people, I'll give you that much credit. Let's assume at least any of you people would go, whoa, dude, you know, that's too much. You know, I am in the wrong place, and you would leave. So that kind of scenario notwithstanding, ordinary people end up in some form of religion. You should be able to see this. There are many, 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 many people all over this world that at one time felt as though they should be doing something of a kind of spiritual nature with their life. I mean, more than the general dissatisfaction that everyone suffers from being here. They end up always in a form, to put it most crudely and simplistically and directly, some form of faith that the answers cannot be known, that none of the priests, none of the rabbis, none of the gurus have an astounding answer that seems to be profitable, that seems to be practical. And so, in some variation of it is always, there are things that we can't understand, and all you can do is live the righteous life as put down by our prophets, as put down by our erstwhile communicators with the gods. This is what the gods said. If we do this, someday our lot will improve after death, which, as I've hinted to you several times, is not necessarily completely removed from reality. But it's not a matter of you going to heaven or some form of paradise and suddenly being in your same form, except now you're going to have an automatic nose job and your hair grown back and your breast increased and your hips narrowed and a Corvette every year. But you are left ordinarily with the fact that everyone just accepts that we cannot know this. There are things we can't know. All right, there are things you can know that is the basis of the original itch. But you should have some notion now, besides me telling you, that it has a rather limited appeal. The complexity and the simplicity gets down to such as this. In the last several weeks, I pulled out the one on you that I said was very close to being a real cosmic law. but I don't like to be that dogmatic. Since most people want dogmatism, that's why I more and more refuse to do it, and then make some of you, or allow some of you to go ahead and think that maybe I really don't know it all after all, or else why would I ask questions? Why wouldn't I just state the goddamn rules and the facts? Which some of you have been around long enough, at one time I did. But that is not the way to do it now. But the one I gave you, and I just suggested to you that it might be a very strong, persuasive attempt on life's part, instead of a great cosmic law, and that was either you do or you don't. And in the last several weeks, I've had notes from here, from out of town, that ranged all the way from this. I'm not going to quote anyone because I'm not singling out any of you for an attack of any kind. But there were distinct indications from several people that expressing that they couldn't understand why I placed so much importance on that, when that just seemed just as evident as rain. But if you've been able to listen with a halfway sane ear all this time, what have I ever told you besides that that was that astounding? So either you do or you don't. Now we could look at that as being self-evident. You could look at that as being absolutely the height of simplicity, almost to the point of idiocy. Well, sure, that includes everybody. Either you do or you don't, so what? And rich simplicity is this. That's what I was hinting about swallowing your own head. Is everything that you know at line level of consciousness. If you were to fulfill what your original dreams were, the words you had picked up of becoming enlightened, all the phrases have gone through history and been remembered of people saying something happened to me and it was suddenly as though I were awake amongst the sleeping. Something happened to me and it was as though I could see and realized I was living amongst the blind. I could hear and I realized everyone else was deaf. The descriptions are fair enough as far as words go. There is a biophysical, biochemical, electrical, physical reality to it all, which I have plotted for you for the first time in the history of humanity with these charts of mine, these maps, these disposable maps, these two-dimensional squiggles, that it is a continuing growth of the nervous system. Located, the easiest to talk about, it seems to be located in the physical brain of man, and what has been called consciousness, an awareness of oneself on a binary basis as opposed to one's non-self. And how this has aided a kind of obvious growth. What they're describing is someone in the past. They're describing that which I knew, I have suddenly re-known. That which I apparently knew at line level, or down in here, is now I know it from up here. That is the basis of, I suddenly find myself, as it were, being awake amongst the sleeping, being sighted amidst the blind. It is as though, and I'm not really hiding anything, I'm just not going to make you a dogmatic statement to put down as God's Word, although I know what it is. It is as though everything that you have known down here, assuming you've met the requirement of being laterally expanded and experienced enough to actually belong in this, and of course you've got to have the genetic wherewithal, which I can do nothing about. It is as though, once you can activate this system, it's not suddenly of you realizing, for instance, that we are shadows of some other creatures on planet 247Z or whatever it was I said. The immediate shock, the so-called mystical experience is, everything I knew, I have suddenly relearned. everything I saw, I have suddenly re-seen. In a sense, that is simplistic. But the complexity of it is, until you have done it, then hearing it, what I just said and everything else, is interpreted through this wiring system, and it's never anything new. The complexity is that people cannot relearn that which they are already wired up to know under any ordinary condition, and very few people can ever do it. All the historic attempts that people have made once they underwent what they call a mystical experience, a spiritual rebirth, they all mention the shock of it. I was knocked to my knees. I was blinded. I staggered about. I locked myself in the closet and laughed for several hours. I was afraid to go outside. All sorts of things. Or I thought somebody had slipped me the world's greatest dope. But after that note, I'm not giving you a history lesson again. I'm just doing things other than giving you dogmatic statements. After that, it's all rather benign. It's like my old story, if you recall, of God showing up in Cleveland and giving the secret. And the secret is, let us say, the story I used to make up for you was, I'm here to tell humanity you want the secret. The secret is, love's the answer. And everybody goes, well, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Glad to hear it, though, from the source. The religions are rather benign. Hollywood can try to elaborate on Moses coming down from a mountain and being pissed about what they were up to, and waving stone tablets and screaming, doing a prior version of Jimmy Swaggart, a portent. But after that, what is it? Pretty benign. But it is close enough to the reality of what would create a favorable background for a person to change, such as the Ten Commandments. It is just enough that no one can actually do them. Or the Golden Rule. Or it'll be Jesus or someone saying, the secret of it all, the secret of this life that I'm talking about is to love everyone as you would love yourself. And it just vibrates everywhere, not just in the yellow circuit. It just feels right. Doesn't require space travel. Doesn't require that you shave your head and wear funny clothes. It doesn't say that you have to give up drinking and sexual carousing. Just a few words and yeah, that's got to be it. And he said it, so it's got to be it. But no one can actually do it. And yet it's rather benign. It's almost a sensation of, well, if I really wanted to, if I had a little more time, if I was a little younger, if I'd started this a little younger, I could do it. Any serious, right-intentioned person could do it. Just no doubt about it. I forget, I'm too busy, I just don't have time. Plus, all the religions always give you the way out. That all have missed the mark, none of us can do it. But do your best. Do your best, pay your tithes. There is an absolute experience to this. I no longer surely have to give any warning, giving you people in other cities. You can tell from the tapes that I don't put on any show to be strange or to be weird. And we don't have a great deal of secret rituals of handshakes and writing our names in blood and swearing to protect one another through thick and thin, and everyone carrying my picture around. But there is an absolute mystery and complexity to this, but it's not what everyone's hardwired system believes it is. And no matter how you try to figure it out, at line level, what I say, what you've read, what you think that you have observed concerning the nature of man, you cannot figure your way above the line. There is no information that you can put into the hardwired system at line level consciousness. As you electronic New Agers would say, if you are going to measure what goes in as garbage, it is not going to come out as Plato's Symposium Revisited. And you should know it. It's not me having to preach a sermon or make a dogmatic statement. You should know it by now. Many people have the partner's voice that have told you for years how exceptional you were. It was mainly telling you how weird you were, but how strange you were, and that you were making progress, that you would go from one false teacher to another false teacher and you'd see through them, or you read the latest book. At least you're not hung up on reading whatever was the hot mystical book 2 years ago. You got the new one. So you're obviously on the right track. You're nobody's fool. But you don't understand anymore at this level, no one does, than you did when you started. It is a foregone conclusion. The complexity is being able to physically bring this about. You've got to know about it. To put it in the terms that sound simplistic, but I've assured you they're not quite that simplistic, it is almost fatalistic as whether you can do it or not. And many people in the beginning hope that just some sort of spiritual charisma or charm or magic of some great teacher they would find would sweep you away, that you'd be taken into some state of higher consciousness bliss, whether you made much effort or not. And that is not the way it works. That's the way it works out in life. You can get that. You can get that at bargain prices. The simplicity in such areas is me pointing out to you that either you do or you don't. Let's assume that anyone who heard that and thought that I had anything serious in mind, and they listened to it, maybe I made a few more comments, maybe they went away and thought about it for 2 seconds, 2 hours, and went, well, that's true. But that's meaningless. I understand that. I understood as soon as you said it. I saw that you could take that description and say that that's true, and I guess it is true. But I went away and I pondered it for a week. And I see no more significance after a week of hard thought than I do as soon as you said it. What is the big deal? You could say that about almost anything that I have ever mentioned. Here's the complexity. It is a big deal, but not the way in which you heard it. And it will never be a big deal at that level. And so anyone who thinks, well, if you insist that that or anything else I've mentioned is a big deal, then I really missed something. No, you didn't. But at this level, down in this part of your system and everyone else's, everything that goes into the tiger becomes tiger. You can feed the tiger abstract data. You can feed him the Quran, the Torah. You can feed him Captain Marvel comic books. But you have got to understand, assuming all that would be digestible by my tiger, it all becomes tiger meat. Well, tiger meat and shit, of course. But the point is, everything that goes into a tiger that he's going to assimilate is going to become tiger. You can go up to him and ask him, did you get and eat that very valuable translation, that Greek translation that I sent you? To the tiger, it was the same thing as it was when he ate comic books. There's no difference. If he ate it, it's now tiger. What you hear at line level, what everyone hears, just instead of tiger, fill in your name. Fred, Mary, Sam, Alonzo hears this, he eats it, thinks about it, it simply becomes Alonzo. That's it. That's the folly then of someone saying, well, I say it's the folly, from this very limited viewpoint now, of someone saying, let me tell you my opinion. Let's discuss this. Well, there's nothing to discuss. Let's see if we can get together and come to some meeting of the minds. Let me see if I can add something to this. But all Alonzo can ever add is Alonzo. Alonzo can say, now I have traveled, I spent many months in such and such locales, I spent many hours speaking with this or that famous person, and so I have something worthwhile to report. They can't report on their experience, they can report on Alonzo. They can't report on new information that they got from some famous personage, some extraordinary experience that occurred in their travels. They can report on Alonzo. All they can do is tell you about tiger meat. You have really been a drain on me if you still don't have a fairly frequent perception of the reality of this. You don't need me to tell you every week. All you got to do is just find yourself at continuing moments to be charitable. But there you sit trying to figure out some problem you got, trying to figure out where you want to lie in some relationship with someone, some transaction that just occurred, some conversation, some attempt that you made that seemed to have failed. And you're sitting there, by figuring it out, I want you to take that to its fullest extreme. But you're attempting to figure out what happened, to learn something, to learn from your mistakes. All you learn is that everything in me is Alonzo. The tiger can't learn from mistakes. If he can digest it, it becomes tiger meat. It's not a mistake. It becomes tiger. And there's no way that he can say, I learned a lesson. If he did say that, it's tiger meat talking. He can't learn anything outside of tiger meat. So someone's voices could say to them, upon hearing almost anything that I've said, such as either you do or you don't, and the voices say, I understand that, yeah. I mean, that's simple enough, even I understand it. Well, what in the hell's the significance of it? Well, my drawing, I guess if even ordinary people listened for a few minutes, I could almost make it visually that if this were true, I could say to them, can you follow what I'm saying, that here's all this information that you've gotten from all ordinary means? And I don't mean that there are extraordinary means out there. I don't mean that there are people hiding in caves in India that can tell you something that's going to change everything. I don't mean that. I mean, this is everything you have ever experienced, you believe. This is everything that you think, as far as you can believe. It's everything you believe, as far as you think. That there it is, and it doesn't seem to move. You can apparently cram more information into it, more so-called facts, other opinions, and you're still you. You're still the same flaccid nothing that you thought you were when you were 16 and started this. I got more facts, but if anything, I seem more confused. You've simply got to realize that. But it's not the fault of something out there, and it's not that you have yet to find the astounding secret. Is all of this has to be moved to a new locale. That is what is astounding. That is what has always been described by people that, in a sense, didn't even deserve it, that I can talk about accidentally occurring. But then they suddenly look out at themselves in life and they realize, I have been here in the midst of this, and there's been a whole other drama going on. There's been a whole other flow of energy going on right in front of me. Not spirits, not vapors, not colorful auroras around people. I'm talking about everything ordinary. The most mundane things going on are not actually all that's going on. In one real sense, to be able to take that step, to be able to become conscious above here, in one real way, I can tell you, is not that extraordinary. Not in the sense that you suddenly acquire all manner of would-be mystical and magical powers. It's that everything you knew, the most simplistic of things that you knew, you suddenly renew. You re-know them. It is so simplistic. What can you make of it in the beginning? What can you make of it in theory? If they say that the secret is to love thy neighbor as thyself, the whole world, let's assume, has heard that. And other those that are wired up so that they don't, which has got to be some, of course, or it wouldn't be a ball game. Let's assume the majority of humanity hears that and agrees with it. Got to be true. They are wired up. So in my equation of either you do or you don't, they do. They believe it. That the secret is to love everyone else as you love yourself. Let's assume that that is a reflection. Let's assume that that's as valid and as usable a map as I have ever made up. All right, the whole world's already heard it. Most of the world says it's true. So what? There's another way to know it. Not through some secret of putting numbers on all the letters and adding them all together and dividing by 96, 96, 77139, and then changing it into Chinese, and then running it through a pasta machine, and it comes out that there's the secret. It wasn't really simply love your neighbor as yourself. Now I know the secret. The secret, if there were a secret, which everyone has to assume there is, but you've heard that down here, but if you can get it up here, that's when you're confronted with the mystical. And that's when you understand that this is complex. It is the height of simplicity. But anything you eat at line level consciousness changes nothing. Too many of you still, new people and otherwise, are in this position. In case any of you would sit there right now and listen to your inner voices, say, I wonder if this really applies to me. Well, here's a way to tell if you've got any doubt. Is that your approach to this, whatever you think this is, me and whatever's going on, me and whatever that you imagine is going on in the group that you don't know about, something being done behind your back, something being done on a level that you are not privy to. All the wild imagination, or those of you that still got imagination, there's some great organization in Afghanistan that I've got a direct link to, and if you really shape up, I'll send you over there. I'll send you a letter of introduction. Is your approach to this, everything that you imagine, everything that you feel, everything you suspect, everything that in any way touched your notion of this original mystical quest, your approach to all of it is still self-centered. That is, what you think about, the voices you listen to is always about me, 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 me. Not because that is sinful, although you might note all the religions always have talked about something about humility and that we should not be so self-centered. But see, that information is all down here. So I'm telling you the same words, but I'm telling you on another level. It's everything you do is from the tiger's viewpoint. Everything you do is from the damn skeletal, muscle system, the breath, the brain activity of you at line level. If you're Alonzo, is your approach to all of this, when I say self-centered, remember I'm not speaking in any sort of guilt-ridden spiritual terms. But your pictures, the voices that speak to you that you still entertain about all of this, is always from a concentric position of what do you think? How do you react to what I just said? How does this apply to your problems? How does this apply to some of the theories, some of the ideas, nay, some of the facts that you knew before you met me? How can you reconcile what I've just said with some of the things you know must be true? How about all the times I gave task of going out, when I told you to do it in conjunction with going out and walking in a rather peaceful setting, to try and make certain observations of the workings of your own nervous system up in the brain. Did anybody, during that time, just for one instance, it's going on all the time, but there was a good example, did it ever strike any of you that all you think about, we're getting very simplistic here, that everything you think about is based on you? Now, I could take an ordinary group of people, if they'd listen for a few minutes, I could make them say, well, hell yeah, certainly. But so what? What else have I got to deal with? It is so simplistic down in here that you absolutely miss it. Because the thing I'm talking to is turning into tiger meat. The thing that's listening chews it up and goes, yeah, I can hear that. You're saying everything I think about is from my viewpoint. Hey, that's either idiotically obvious, or else, you know, you're 2 or 3 bubbles off of a plum. What else, how else could I think about things? How else could I approach anything? All I got is me. When I say self-centered, it's on the basis, if you would listen to the voices that you take as being you, just start there. At the voices, it's always on the basis that the I speaking, this voice speaking that you think is you, just this running noise of a working nervous system, a working part of life's body, that this thing talking is the beginning of every sentence. It is at the center of everything. Now, I'm not speaking as some attack, some attempt to attack egoism. It's got nothing to do with that. But you don't realize this voice, everybody is wired up in this nervous system, their place, the position they're fulfilling in life's body, that everything emanates from this center, and you don't notice where it starts. It is my problems, my beliefs, my opinions, my viewpoints, my interest. It is the unanalyzed, it is the originally inescapable position that I have got to start here. Starting here is where I need to start, and starting here is what will take me into some fertile field of discovery, and it will not. Everyone at line level, you, the Pope, believes that their problems are the doorway, and if they're lucky enough, and if the gods bless them enough, it is ultimately the path to some kind of spiritual, religious, mystical discovery, if not salvation. My problems. It's the eternal Job story. You don't hear it, but it's going on here all the time. Every time the voice speaks, it is like it creating its own solar system. And that voice is the sun. And it all radiates from that. And you cannot move from that position. You'll never see past that position. You can go out walking. You can go out and try to go out and philosophize and ponder. But all you're doing is feeding something to a tiger, and it will all turn into tiger meat. All you're doing is running apparent new information back at line level consciousness, and it all radiates that same solar system. The same way that our solar system has a few planets revolving around, you've got a few opinions, a few beliefs. There seems to be 2 or 3 so-called variations of your personality. reflecting what seems to be your interest. You got a weak Pluto. You got a strong Venus. But every time this voice speaks, every time the juices run through this nervous system, every time the heart pounds and the lungs breathe, it is this voice that you take at that time as being you, as establishing itself as the center of your solar system, and then everything that follows is tiger meat. Those of you that have really had the experience of going above the line have some notion out of all of this of how I have tricked you. I keep saying that, is how I have assisted you. The task, even times that weren't tasks, some of the maps, the way that I have kept hammering at things and turning things almost to the point of becoming astounding. Never quite so. Taking you in places where I draw out maps that seem to unfold and get closer and closer into some kind of Gothic, very intricate description you know is coming up to explain everything, and then it's like we hit the edge of a map, or I just drop it and forget about it. The simplicity in the beginning is you have got to be wired up to do this. I have talked around the edges of this, and some of you heard me quite plainly in the past, but let me say it outright. If any of you new people need to hear it. You either belong in this and you don't. There's nothing I can do about it. Or, if you like, if I could, I would not. That is not the way it's done. People who believed in the beginning they've been called by gods, people that in the beginning believe that they have been chosen in some way. It is simply the nervous system. There are people that are wired up to do this. There are people wired up to become priests or rabbis. There are people to become gospel evangelists, gospel singers, people to write religious philosophy. In the same way that there are people wired up to become murderers that are always going to be, at the horizontal level, disruptive in their time and place. To believe that a calling to pursue some mystical path is different than someone who starts off and they just have this fascination with music. And they begin playing the violin at the age of 5. And just their whole life becomes music. I picked that as opposed to slapping you with a fish again in the face about murderers and rapists, but they're all in there. To believe that my urge, as you would have thought in some time past, to pursue a mystical quest of some kind is surely singular. In quality, it is no different than being wired up to be a prodigy, to be just an absolute captive of music, or some other field of endeavor that you would like to fill in for yourself. Those of you that may believe that you are completely committed to this, to what I'm doing, or if not me, you're going to find somebody else along the line. Where in the world did you get this idea? Where did you sit down one day and suddenly figure it out? We're back to simplicity again, except no one can see it. How about all the people who seem to have talent, who can paint, who can sit down and knock out novels that other people want to read, who can knock out music? And they continually say this. They get a Grammy Award, they're recognized for something, and they say, I'd like to thank God who gave me this gift. Well, they're a lot closer to telling the truth than it would be if we find somebody that talked about what kind of effort it takes, and this idea of being inspired to write music is a bunch of bunk, that, boy, I have to get down and sweat, and I work over every note. And writers that say, I get down sometimes and I'll spend 2 weeks on one sentence. Then there are other writers that say, I sit down and it's as though some kind of muse comes upon me, and my fingers and the little word processor just begin to do a dance, and it just comes out. It's like some kind of gift. They are closer to telling the truth, and nobody ever hears it. Now, I don't mean people that are wired up to say, yeah, God's everywhere. Because those people, you got to understand, are buying there because they wouldn't believe If Rick James or James Brown said, God tells me to write my music, the kind of people that ordinarily believe that would say, wait a minute. God may have, he may have had Bach writing his stuff, and he may give Jimmy Swaggart the songs he writes, but hey, Prince and Sheila E., God's not inspiring them. You're supposed to know what I mean by now. There are people wired up to either they do or they don't. But those who say, that try to say their best, that I don't know how I paint. I mean, I know when it's good. Some days I'll get up, I try to paint every day, and some days I'll start, and it's like this inspiration's not on me. It's just, I can stand there and paint. I can do an imitation of my style. I can do one that somebody come along and say, that almost looks like a bad Picasso, and that'd be right, because some mornings I throw away everything I've done all day. And other days I get in there and I just start, and it's as though my hand has a mind of its own. They are closer to telling the truth, and nobody really learns anything from it. And what might they learn, of course, you ask. Now, if you've got the nerve to, that nobody knows what in the hell they're doing. That no one knows what they're going to say next. That those that would say, I don't deserve this award, I'm pleased that you people like the songs I write and the way in which I sing. I had very little practice. I never really took lessons. It just, as long as I can remember, I got my voice, my mouth, and I could sing, and people liked to hear it, and I started writing music. And I can't even tell you I wrote these songs. It's like, I'll just be riding on the bus from one show to another, and suddenly something will go doom, and I'll start writing, and it's a song. I just hear the whole thing. There is life at work. And for years, of course, it's been hidden under things, all right, the gods pick out some people. But at the horizontal level, please note, as I was trying to get you to see through my little humor, it really explains nothing down at the tiger level, because there are people are wired up to whether either they do or they don't, and there are some people that will hear that explanation, and if it's music that they're wired up to like, or painting they're wired up to like, they go, all right, that's true, the God's given that gift. But then they turn around and they show them Rivers painting or some abstract, and they go, hey, God didn't tell that guy to paint that shit. Or they hear some erotic tinged contemporary music, and they say, all right, gods might have dealt with Papa Brahms, but God didn't tell this guy, this little punk to get out there and write that kind of stuff. And of course, nobody sees what's going on. That's part of what keeps it all going. But unbeknownst, those old stories of people saying, I don't know how I do this. It must be it's the gift of the gods. They are closer to telling the truth. At least if they'll say, I don't know, I can't take credit for this. If they'd stop there, that wouldn't be bad. Of course, I'm being silly. That's an act be, because it's not going to happen. If it did happen, nobody would hear it. The person who said it wouldn't know why they said it. They would think they understood it down here. Back to what I started to mention. What seems to be oneself, what seems to be the culmination of this continuing pulsating electrical energy, this biochemical flow, culminating in our day and time, where all of you people are, into my yellow circuit, creating all the activity in the brain. There's no exception. I'm just picking out the most common descriptions. What seems to be one's inner voice, what seems to be one's own mind working, what seems to be one's own personality, whatever it is that is speaking through you, whatever it is that seems to be your own awareness. It is continually, as it hits this point, as it pulses through here, you don't recognize it establishes itself. Alonzo the tiger is the sun of that momentary solar system, and from there on out, the statements of one's position, and primarily one's problems, one's difficulties, is assumed by everyone to be at least the crude detailing of a door of salvation, at least a crude pointing of a path that this is where I should be going. And of course, the more people are wired up to be religious, it gets into such things as, all right, the gods have selected certain problems and put them on me as a kind of trial, as a kind of testing, that I can struggle through these problems. You can struggle all you want to. You can try and figure out all you want to, because down here whatever goes in becomes tiger meat. That nothing is going to change. Until you can get above that level. And you were either wired up to have that potential or you weren't. And some of you might as well face up to it. I faced up to it a long time ago when I started this. It took me, once apparently I couldn't get out of doing this, I don't know, it took me all of, I guess, 45 minutes or an hour the first time that I put out the call, gave out tempting, I thought would be tempting morsels of bait to get people to show up. Fair-sized number of people showed up that first time. I guess I'm exaggerating to say it took 45 minutes. Once I got there and looked at who showed up, I realized, I said to myself, I said, this is not quite as simple as I thought it was going to be. Notice I didn't say that I said that to God or somebody, because nobody had told me that. But I did realize this is not as straightforward as I had assumed it would be. That only those who could hear this would even show up. But then I learned, I thought, well, only those that can hear this will stay. They may come once or twice just out of curiosity to get a free cup of coffee or get in out of the cold. People are wired up to have different needs now. It's not to satisfy me, but to ever experience what this is about. To ever get past the point of feeling as though this is a continuing form of philosophy, or that I am talking in circles, or that there is some secret that either I don't know, or else I know it and I won't tell you for some reason. Until you can get above this, if you're wired up for the potential of it, I have furnished other necessary ingredients. I cannot do it all, but if you had the potential, the time is coming shortly upon all of you that I've got to have more people that through experience understand what this is, or it's, as I said, another turn of the merry-go-round wheel, wherein that which was acceptable, that which at least was not a complete energy loss on my part, the stakes are going to be upped again. And some of you very likely will not be here. Another one that is a prime example of the condition down here, my Alonzo or my Tiger, the binary nature of what goes on here, is such that another prime example is me using the ordinary conception of there being a difference between genetics, that is heredity, and the environment. We're running out of tape, so I'll pick it up in a second. The many times that I have used and referred to man's struggle over the apparent attempt. Is it running? Is everything running? My reference to the binary concepts that man has, that there is obviously hereditary influences in him, and then there's obviously environmental influences. And the many, many examples I've pulled out over the last several years, you surely know that there is much more to it that I was inferring than for me to use as examples and trying to show that humanity in some way is misled and missing the point. It is just a prime example of everything going in here, and it's a prime example of something else, so I'll go ahead and mention to you. It's an attempt of life to heal up a wound. And that wound is humanity's open end. It is life's own, at the level that we're interested in, it's life's own place in which it grows, but it is as though it were an open wound, is a place in which life is not sewn up completely. It is a place if life itself had an extrinsic injector plant, it made the plastic body of life, and it's the weak point. It's where the plastic was injected, and it keeps attempting to heal itself and grow at the same time. It comes about as this continuing piece of the master stroke, of course, of this continuing energy being produced back and forth between people on the basis that something out there is having everything ranging from a partial to a complete effect on what I do. I still get notes from some of you that you either believe that you have completely missed the point, or that some of you want to gently try and get me to reconsider that there's got to be environmental causes, and perhaps I have not familiar with the work of Dr. So-and-so. All right, here's what it is. Your genes are heredity, that you either believe that you have completely missed the point, or that some of you want to gently try and get me to reconsider that there's got to be environmental causes, and perhaps I have not familiar with the work of Dr. So-and-so. All right, here's what it is. Your genes are heredity. Their genes are your environment. That's it. 2 years I talk about it, and I can wrap it up in 2 seconds, 5 seconds. That's it. But can you perceive the need for it to be thusly? It is back to the perception of in here and out there. And that's what they've been talking about all this time. At line level consciousness, there is no way out. In the same way that there is no way out of any binary cul-de-sac. There's no way out of any binary situation. Doesn't have to appear to be a dead end, but any binary situation, there is no way out. Either you do or you don't. All right, I choose, I'm going to be on the do side. Okay. But then you got the problem, well, listen, something's wrong here because these other people are on the don't side, and so if I'm right, if I chose the right side, what's wrong with these people? If it were possible, through some fluke, you decide I'll change parties. I'll go over with those who don't. I'll go over there and assist them, and we'll take over. We'll make the people who do realize the folly of their do, of their position. Nothing happens. Nothing happens in the sense that those involved understand anything. Nothing happens in the sense of humanity being forced to mouth and believe that things are not correct. There's some work that is not finished. We're not complete. We do not operate. We do not behave in a manner that's pleasing to some kind of higher forces. So the answer has got to be within the master stroke to keep things going, or else it would be mechanically simplistic to the point it would freeze the machinery of life up if everyone were made to believe that, hey, you were right vis-a-vis this imaginary verbal, if not literal, battle between environment and heredity. There is no environment. We're all wired up this way. This is it. There's nothing to be done. Willie was right. It's all a stage and we're all players. And nobody's got the script. Nobody can change anything. Woe is me. As long as there is the perception that there is me and then there's not me, and that I am in some way an individual, original source. I come up with original ideas. I come up with things that are unique to me. I come up with my own motivations. I constantly do. Somebody say, you want to go to a movie tonight? And I go, no, not tonight. Well, hey, you want to go out and maybe we'll go out and have Italian tonight? No, not in the mood for Italian. Are you still going with that such and such girl? Nah. A couple of times, she wasn't my type. Did you ever finish such and such book that you bought? I read the first couple of chapters, and that's trash. I am separate from the book. I'm separate from Italian food. I'm separate from the movie. I'm separate from the people who are asking me. I am a little solar system. I am a little sun. Everybody is. The simplicity of it is, if you can get in the position that I have tried to drag those that belong here, the position I've tried to take you to, right up to an edge, it's not that astounding, but the edge is you look over and everything I ever imagined to be true is true, but not like I thought it was true. And there is an out there, in a sense, but what seems to be out there to me is somebody else's wiring system. What life calls environment is other people's genes. That's it. It's other people's heredity. But you couldn't put it in those terms. That could not be what life would make man to perceive of, or it would freeze everything. The master stroke would become unmastered. And so the mind, although the number of you that laughed and sighed heavily when I pointed out that your genes are heredity, as life would call it, and their genes are your environment. How long could you hold that? I only said it, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes ago. Now I have to repeat it, and you have to try your best. Yeah, it's true. And of course, on the contrary, on the other hand, to them out there individually, what they think they are, to them, is heredity. And what is not them, that is, what's their environment, is your heredity. Your genes are their bad news. Your genes are what people used to call the devil. Instead of saying the devil made me do it, what people are saying is, their genes made me do it. Except, you can't deal with that, not at line level. And so, it comes out that, yeah, we all have a genetic background. I mean, heredity certainly plays a part. It influences my bone structure, my race, my sex, the color of my hair. And some of that can't be helped. But by God, the greater influence on me is the environment. The pressures put up on me, the way people treat me, the way my parents treated me. Your parents, in the sense of people believing that was of a great and could have been alterable situation. That was your environment. But your environment was their genes. And their attitude toward you, we've tried to raise this kid right, and look how he turned out. We did everything that we thought was right. And he has been nothing but a pain, and I'm eternal asses. You were their environment. But it's not a matter of some. That's why people can't put their finger on philosophers or psychologists or anybody. They cannot actually put their finger on the environment. It keeps on this situation. It's part of the master stroke. It keeps helping fuel certain specific parts of the machinery of life, the living machinery of life's body, that there is something out there that we can do something about. Now, we can't do anything the psychiatrist says to the patient, the book says to you that you're reading. All right, let's assume, let's just accept the fact we can't do anything about your genetic makeup. Now, any fool knows that, and you go, yeah, I know that. But the environment we can have some effect over. And everybody goes, yeah. People don't have to, your parents didn't have to treat you the way they did. And in future generations, once psychiatry, once this idea, once humanity becomes more civilized, now that you're about to become a parent, you see the bad environment in which you were raised. Yeah, I do. And I believe since you've been through now about best I recall, over $100,000 worth of analysis with me, I believe now you see that a large part of your problem was your parents, right? And you go, yes, it was. And now you're old enough to become a parent, and you're not going to do that same thing to your children, are you? No. Because we can affect the environment. We can affect the environment. We can do away with criminal behavior because it's the environment that makes people that way. We can do away with religious warfare because people are not born to be a Catholic and then suddenly attack Protestants, or people are not born just being Jewish and just suddenly look around and say, aren't you an Arab? If so, I think I'll kill you. No, that's not what happens. It's the intolerable conditions, the prejudicial conditions. It's the environment. And it sounds exactly right to any right-thinking, urbane, sophisticated, intelligent person. It's the environment. Look at Northern Ireland. Look at the high unemployment rate. There is why we have the Catholics and the Protestants fighting. Look at poor Lebanon. The kind of absolute economic, political breakdown, trace it all back to the environmental causes of these kind of tribal infighting between not only diverse religious groups, but cults, offshoots within the same religion. We can do something about it. And it sounds right, other than the fact that it cannot be noted except by hardwired smart alecks. And there, of course, their voice means nothing. It cannot be noted in any profitable manner that all that sounds right and nothing has ever been done about it, and nobody can even put their finger on what the environment is. They put together commissions, they turn out reports, but they've been doing that for thousands of years. All you got to do is try and see and listen above the line level, and you realize nobody can identify the environment. But if they could, then it would become stable. If they could see what it was, and the master stroke would be unmastered. And so you hear that environmental causes on what you are, what other groups of people, what other individuals are, that is what can be changed. And we can't change the genetics of people. We can't change the way these people were born, the way you were born. But the environmental conditions, that is what we can change. And they do not see that the environmental conditions is everybody else's genes compared to you. And to select them and call them their genes, then everything that is not them genetically, which includes you, you are then part of the background. You are then part of the problem. You are then part of their environment. What else is the environment? It's everybody else's heredity. That's it. And consciousness cannot see it. Let's assume that a lot of you thought you really heard something finally out of that. But how simplistic can it be? Well, yeah, once you put it that way, I see what you mean. No, you don't. Because if you saw what I meant, you would have almost swallowed your own head. You would have seen that which is astounding, but you would have seen that which was complex as simple. And just as deadly, you would have seen that which is simple that is so complex I could never tell anyone. Well, you could try. Well, I could tell them this. What you see is what you get. What you see is actually what you're seeing. It's just minus just a little bit. And what's actually going on is really what's going on. I mean, it really is. And it's just a little bit. And the person says, well, I trust you because you worked hard to become mystical. And you say, yeah, I did. And you say, I believe you, well, did you succeed? And you say, yeah, I did. I'll admit it, I did. So you know that which I won't know. And you told them, well, all right, since we're such old friends, I'll tell you, yeah. The things we used to talk about, now I know what it is. I mean, I know it personally. And they say, all right, what is it? And you would say, all right, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not holding anything back. It's everything that you always imagined, everything you thought, everything that when you look out and you see what's going on, and you think something's wrong, it's not. It's all just like it is, and it's just right, except it's just a teeny little bit that you're missing. But other than that, it's all just like it is. Just like everybody says it is, those that say yay and those that say nay. Now, I know that's not going to make any sense because you think it's got to be one or the other. But imagine, forget the laws of physics, but imagine right now that we're living in a 2D world. And your friend says, okay, all right, everybody lives or steps on one side of this world or the other. Let's assume that it seems to be kind of a black and a gray side. And that represents, people that say yeah about this and people that say no about this. People that say there must be God somewhere and people that say it's not. All this. And your friend says, yeah, I know, we used to talk about it. You say, I'd imagine, if you can, that's a 2D world in which we live, but there's actually a 3D world that this is only a small part of. Well, that's 2/3 of this 3D world. And so you don't have to stand. When I say that every time you hear yay and nay, they're both true, and your mind says, nah, no, you're either being allegorical, or else you're an idiot. Because there's got to be one or the other. And you say, no, it's not that. They're both there, and they both exist, and they're both equally valid, except if you're only seeing 2D, it's like seeing a machine froze up, and you think, all right, one of the wheels have got to turn. One of them's got to be able to turn the other one. One of these has got to have more force than the other. You say, no, imagine, it looks like that this whole map of humanity, of our existence, is either colored black or gray. And that's all you can see. And he says, okay, all right. You say, imagine, all right, try this. Imagine that you could find some kind of like a little magic beanie with a propeller, and you could fly up, and you got a little higher, and you say, aha, that there was a whole nother landscape. There's a whole piece of all the maps of equal size, those purple polka dots. And it took up as much room as the black and the gray did. That the black and gray, it didn't have to be one or the other. They're both there with plenty of room. It is an enriched simplicity. It gets to a certain point is why you cannot talk about it directly. And there are even people who say such things as that do not understand it. They're wired up and it sounds right. And that leads many other people, would-be followers, people that are wired up to be attracted to such as that, to believe, listen, this man is so enigmatic, he must know something. Of course, you're just wired up to be attracted to it, that's all it is. It is an absolute and rich simplicity wherein everything that seemed to be in either opposition, things that seem to be anomalies, are not things that you were wired up to say about someone else. It's their imagination, as though it could be dismissed, as though it belonged over in the part of the map that says foolishness, wrong, in error. There's room for it. There's room for it. It wouldn't be here. Where do you think it came from? Who slipped it in? These people are nuts. That idea is just completely frivolous. Where did it come from? How did they run in a ringer on a game that by and large seems so well set up, was running when you got here, seems to run whether you agree with it or not. The game seems to keep going on, even if you want to suck on your thumb and think, I don't like it. This ain't fair. I ain't going to play. Nobody seems to notice. The game goes on full tilt. You can sit to your right or boogie till you puke. The dance, the game goes on. And you can go off and say, I will figure it out. I will figure out, I'll start off, I'll narrow it down, whether this is true and that's not true, whether this is right and whether this is wrong. And you tried to tell your friend, if you could get up above it, if you could get another viewpoint, you would see that it's not a question of whether it's this or that. But line level consciousness is based upon this and that. And it cannot hear that. It shouldn't hear it. If an ordinary person could hear it, they'd be nuts. If line level consciousness could hear that, that line would become shattered. But it's not a matter that it's either this or that, because this or that both exist and there's room here. They're both a part of what people always want to refer to as reality, and as would-be mystics are wont to think of as being a great mystical secret somewhere. That finally I'll find out, is it this or that? Right. No, is it this or that? You say, yeah, that's 2/3 of it. It's not either this or that, but the question, is it either this or that? You got 2/3 of it right there. Everybody does. Those who are properly wired up to be involved with this. Now, I reached a point once or twice, even in public, with some of you people that's just been exposed to this a relatively short period of time. I point out, if this is the kind of thing that you need, then this is the most of it going on this planet. If this is not what you're wired up to need, no, you shouldn't be here. This is not what you need. I'm not your savior. But if you're wired up to be here, there has been enough already go on. We reached another one of these little, I'm not overdoing it, it's another little corner that I'm going to pull the rug out from under things. You have got to find out that there is a step that you have to take yourself. I could come up with several poetic descriptions of it. But you people have been here in your midst. You're exposed enough of the people in here. A handful of people are a living example of being able to experience it. Don't worry about constantly, and don't worry about right now whether you've thought somebody in here surely has had a real taste of this, but if they did, why don't they just drop an anvil on their toe and holler, God damn it. If you are wired up in such a way that you've been able, before and or since you've been here, to be able to expand yourself in what I've described in a kind of lateral fashion, that you have a rather unerring, generally unswayable feeling that you are not necessarily right, and that no group, no person on this planet at the ordinary level is necessarily right. And of course, on the contrary. And those of you that have had a real feeling, not attempting to please me, since I don't ask anybody to please me or to give reports on whether I'm being pleasing or not, that you get a real taste of the few demands that I have made, not only of the group behavior, but pointing out to you that you cannot be a critic of life, not for any ordinary religious reasons, but you cannot continue to let the tiger roar. You cannot continue to let your own line level consciousness repeat itself over and over and over about what is wrong, which is all from your little minute solar system viewpoint, that I know things are not right. I know things that need to be changed. I know people are acting foolish when I see them acting foolish. But you've got to feel the reality of that. It's not just a sudden moment of epiphany. Ooh, that slapped me into a higher state of consciousness. But if you belong in this, you've got to be able to feel that, yeah, that's true, long before you got any notion why, which is why I've, in part, pointed out, or even pointed out as I did it, of me not using any kind of pseudo-religious terms because you get stuck with it. Ooh, well, I bet the gods didn't want us to be angry at each other. Hell, everybody knows that. You've been hearing that as long as man's been here. But it's not that. That's part of it. That'll fit. There's room for that. That doesn't tell you anything. But you've got to be able to feel in your own genes that, yeah, you can't do that and do whatever it is I'm trying to do. If you can't feel it, you're in the wrong place. It's just a hobby to you. You're just a dilettante. You've got to be able to feel that every time I entertain these voices seriously, every time I take the same old crap that flows through me of criticism, I don't care under what kind of guise it is, that seems to be well-founded or just seems to be a passing whim of me being mad at a speeding motorist, that when I do this, it doesn't feel right, not compared to anything I was ever taught, not compared to any religion, but the sensation I get of what I think I'm up to is absolutely incompatible with that. And for the time being, that's a very big comma, maybe even a semicolon. I just can't do this. You were right. I can feel it. You've got to feel it. All forms of hostility. It is a counterproductive biochemical operation of the nervous system. It is necessary in life. People have got to be pissed. People have got to be mad. That's the words they use. I'm just going ahead with their words. People have got to be angry. People have got to be critical of one another. People have got to be critical of what other people do. If that didn't happen, we would not be here. But you can't do it for very specific physical reasons. It's always been known. It's been known as far back as they've been writing about people attempting a spiritual quest. The Greeks, the Chinese before them, everybody, every form of religion, all cults coming from religions. Anybody that ever aspired to be any sort of philosopher of any kind would say it. They say, I feel it. The gods told me. My own great understanding finally revealed it to me. It has always been there, the realization of it. For what I have described to you, you can feel it. I could have gone into more detailed descriptions for any of you who wonder if I know enough about the makeup of the human body, which is not even important. It's not even the point. But you should be able to feel. There is no psychology of man separate from the liver. There is no personality separate from the brain, from the spleen, from falling arches. You should be able by now to feel it, that you get angry, and don't listen to their voices say, all right, there's the guides toying with you. They don't want you to be angry. You get mad, and it is like an immediate biochemical change. And according to how you're wired up, this is just generally true with everybody. But it has a quite lingering effect. It is not unnatural, it is not ungodly, but it's incompatible with doing this. It's not because you're making the gods mad, it's because you're attempting to do one thing that I understand what's involved, and I understand in a way, life now understands it in a way that is different than it understood it a generation ago. That it is incompatible with doing this for biochemical reasons. that it sets off reactions in the nervous system, that you're doing nothing. It is continuing, it is reinforcing the automatic mechanical activity down here, among other things, to get angry. That's not the only one. Putting alcohol in the system does it, putting drugs in the system does it. According to how you're wired up, so many of you keep wanting to talk about dreams in the beginning, ask me about dreams. I will tell you one thing to do with dreams. I never told anybody. It's been right in front of you. Just an offshoot of showing you that there is no psychology. Go ahead and notice your damned old dreams if you want to. Go ahead, go to bed tonight, eat whatever it is you eat, do your regular thing, and then notice your dreams. When you get up in the morning, catch them, try to wake up a little early and catch a piece of the dream, then go back to sleep. Then tomorrow, fast for 2 days, and see what happens to your dreams. Then 3 days from now, right before you go to bed, get about 7 different kinds of cheese pizza, drink some cheap wine, and then look at your dreams. And yet people believe, they're wired to believe that dreams are some kind of great cosmic pool, that we all have some kind of connection with the gods or unconscious stories. Of course, a lot of the reaction I'm hearing out there, it hits you immediately. That is true. But how do you explain the mysticism of that? I wasn't going to pursue this, but some of the reasons for fasting throughout history. Been given all kinds of descriptions of attempting to mortify the good old kick-my-ass flesh while appeasing the gods. But what you put in your body, what you simply eat, whether you eat some bland soup at night and white bread, or whether you have bagels and cream cheese with onions on top of them. And nobody seems to ever notice that you wake up in the morning, you've been dreaming of flying horses that keep landing on top of a metal shed that you're inside, and you're trapped with a bunch of Bolsheviks and hairdressers. And every time you try to wake up, the horses keep falling up and they fly over again, they hit the roof. Then some other morning, you never notice, but you wake up and you're dreaming that it looked like it was the spirit of Abraham came down and visited you in a 3-piece suit. It was like just angels or something floating. I wonder what that meant. I should write that down. I'll ask him what that meant. I just told you what it meant. But nobody notices such as that. Well, you're not supposed to, of course. Some of you very shortly, you're going to have to find out how to do this. I've given you enough information. You've had enough experience. If you would take one thing to try again, you should try everything that I've given you, but refuse to think anything you ever thought before. Every time the voices say something that you know what they're going to say, stop it. Just tell them, all right, from now on we're going to do this. You can talk all you want to, but God damn it, don't say anything you said before. I'm sick of it. Or take my word for it. You've gone this far. It's running in place. It's as bad, ultimately, as being angry. That you take the voices, whichever description that seems to suit you best at the time, thinking the same thing twice, or listen to that voice say the same thing, something he said before or she said to you before, is don't listen to it. Tell them beforehand, I'm stopping this. I'll listen to anything. You can go on about your business, but don't you tell me that same old shit. And as soon as you hear it start and you know where it's going, you say, I told no. It's to stop it. You're setting up the kind of conducive condition, and I mean really conducive, to stay with that. It is a biochemical change you're affecting. And it has a specific potential to it. It'll either take you up to the point that absolutely nothing happens and it'll drive you nuts. Not literally, just if you really tried enough, you'd get sick of it, and if I said you got to do it or leave, you'd leave. It'll either do that or it'll set the kind of conditions that all of you dreamed of in the beginning, that you were waiting for a magic pill. But that is the very sort of thing. It will set conditions that it will suddenly open up a place in that kind of juncture box I've described, and literally you will get a chemical and electrical reaction will get up in your brain in a place that you have never been conscious. It is complex and astounding, and it is ludicrous and simple, because you're not going to have the kind of visions that some of you had on LSD 10 years ago. But you simply get energy. You get electricity physically. You get the chemical processes that, at least in the brain, go along with this electrical energy. It will get into areas of the brain itself that have never been fed with what you call consciousness, but they have never received the kind of chemical / electrical energy that creates human consciousness in that part of the brain. And it gets there, and don't wait for visions, don't wait for swishing colors and to hearing Vanilla Fudge playing old 60s songs. You're going to look around at you and not you and realize it's the same fucking thing. And everything I knew was right, except I didn't see it right. I was missing that little bit. There is a whole third area of this map that I never saw. That all the problems, all the conflicts I saw was not an either-or situation, because here they both are. And they're no longer either-or. They're no longer conflicts. I no longer have to take sides because there are no sides. One of these is not going to win. One of these is not going to push the other one off the map, because there's a whole third area that's as big as any of those two that I've never seen. That's what he meant by E. I could never see it, because you're still operating from the position that I am the center of a solar system. I will figure this out. My problems must be pursued. My problems must be dealt with. This is the path. I'm all I got. I must be the path. You can be the path if you want to, but you're not going anywhere. You've had 20, 30, 40 years to realize that. Where does it lead? Well, I don't know. I'm getting closer. You listen to that voice. When's the last time it told you anything new? You remember, don't go back that far. The first and last thing it ever told you new was, hello, I'm you. That was it. To show you the third missing dimension in religious stories all over the world, that was the downfall of man. That was your Satan. That was the serpent that got you. It said, hi, and you went, huh? And it said, I'm you. And it played the ultimate game of suck face with you. It swallowed you. From then on, that was you. Of course, nothing bad happened, remember, because if that hadn't happened, you wouldn't be anybody. You'd be nobody. It could be worse. You could be an actor. You could be a politician. There's a way in which to take this step. A lot of you have been close to it already. Sometimes you were frightened by it. Sometimes you simply wouldn't make the energy. Many times I know full well that you got tangled up in listening to the voices who are going to describe to you, hey, we're about to have a mystical experience. And I know what it's going to be like. And that's when I lost you again. That's when it's as though I'd been spit in the face. That everything I had tried to drag you away from, all this trickery, is you went to say, oh, the voices said to you, hey, this is going to be like Swami so-and-so. This is going to be like Moses talked about. This is what Jesus meant. I can almost feel it. And you were done for. You were back down here feeding the tiger. Nothing happened. But I was so close, I could almost feel it. I just knew. I've given you enough descriptions. You ought to be able to feel it. Many of you are never going to do it. people listening to this now, people that may or may not ever get attracted to this before I buy the farm. Many of you will be quite pleased with what you've done. You'll consider that without this, life would have been even a bigger pain in the ass. It would have been even more boring. You feel better about yourself, as you would probably say, that you're not as mad, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you're wired up to be able to do this, and you don't do it, goddamn, you missed what life is all about from one viewpoint, because there are very few people that ever experience this. And I will grant you, as far as ever turning this into anything of a widespread attractive nature, I have, if we continue along these lines, you could say I've blown it, because you should be able to see that this is not what people are looking for from many viewpoints. This is not what life in general, even those that would become passionate followers of some religion, some philosophical system, this does not produce that kind of passion. I could do it a little more on the basis of me play acting the guru part, but it does not within itself produce that kind of fervor on people. It is too complex, and it's far too simple. It seems to be too occult in the original definition of the word, and plus it seems to be too out front and visible. It seems to be too remote, and that seems to be too accessible. Of course, in the beginning, everybody blames or credits all of this to me personally. The description I just made, either I seem to be remote or I seem to be too up front. But you know, I couldn't be a mystic acting like this, looking like this, talking like this. And everybody gets hung up on, well, that tells me all I need to know, and all it tells you about is that you're a tiger. All it tells you is what Alonso had for breakfast. There is a specific step that many of you have been close enough to even suspect you know what I'm talking about, that you could have almost let go and flown off somewhere. It's almost as though you had one foot still tied to gravity, and you realize if I would lift this foot up right now, I'd go whizzing off somewhere.